I think this church have got along very good in this community, and because we seek to have peace with each other, and by us in the Buddhist church been established for a long time, and we get along well, because we meet, we communicate with each other, and talk with one another. So therefore, if people communicate and compromise with each other and talk with each other and get a good understanding, you can always get along. In 1943 is when the church was founded here. Mm-hmm. The pastor name was Milton Mathis, and he came from Amarillo, Texas. He used to work right here at the farmers market when it was right here on Taylor Street, and he was going to church, I think at the time, in Palo Alto with a pastor there named Pastor Ingram. It's called Sweet Home Church of God in Christ. That's where the pastor, the founder of this church, the Prayer Garden Church of God in Christ, that's where he was going to church when the Lord spoke to him to build a church here in San Jose. And he came and started this church in 1943 in a little storefront building where the sanctuary is sitting now. That was during the war time. The war was just... So things was pretty tough, but however, God blessed them, because with God you can do all things. Yeah, very small membership. This membership then was so small that the people that lived in the upstairs and had church in the downstairs. And I think for about 7 years that they had church that way.
When the pastor first came here, did they have to rent the building, the storefront building, or were they able to?
Yes, they rented the storefront building for a while, and later on, then he inquired about purchasing the property. Mm-hmm. And after that, they bought the property.
When they first started, were most of the members working on the farms?
Actually, his members then, he worked at the farmers market. You remember the place called Beanie's?
Beanie's, yes.
Beanie's Restaurant. Okay, that used to be a farmer's market. That's where they sold fruit and vegetables and stuff. And by him working around there, he came right here and saw this place right here. And the Lord moved on him and asked to rent the place that he could start church. At that time, he had no one but he and his wife. No one, because it wasn't many blacks in San Jose at that time. It was nothing but Hispanic people and mostly Chinese in this area here. Across the street in front of the church, the city courtyard, was all Chinese at that time. Most of the congregation came from Oakland, Palo Alto, and surrounding areas, But it was great because people didn't mind driving, And when people love a church and the pastor, people comes to a church because you have three classes of people, I should say, because you have one, the first class probably like the pastor, then the second like the church, then there's others just go with the flow. So this church have a great history, and it was known for the radio broadcast. It would go from 11, and people would come from Stockton, they would come from San Francisco, Santa Cruz, Palo Alto at 11 o'clock at night to be in service. We would have service from 11 until. The pastor would get on the broadcast and say, we here until. And at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, Monday morning, a lot of times we'd be still having church. And the people would be, would be praising God and rejoicing in the Lord. That went on for years, you know. This church is the only church that I know that had a broadcast that started 11 o'clock at night and stayed here until Monday morning. And the people still didn't want to leave.
When the church did its broadcasts, was the broadcast done over a particular radio station?
Yes, KEEN, King, Radio King. Yeah, that's what for years that's where we broadcast from. And we broadcast live right from the church. And it was, oh God, it was awesome. You just couldn't compare no church service nowhere with type service. It had to be awesome for the people to come. We had, I guess, 100 voice choir ourselves at the time. After the Prayer Gardens choir, when they get through singing in Cathedral of Faith, choir used to come after they dismissed service and sang on the radio broadcast. The organ player was named Nancy Homer. She used to come over and her in the choir, the whole choir would come over and sing on the broadcast. And oh God, it was, at that time we had a mixed congregation. We had some Spanish, we had, I remember having some Chinese people, Caucasian. It's kind of a multicultural congregation that we had. And everybody was blessed and everybody was comfortable with each other. It was just a wonderful time at that time. At the time, the Lord spoke to him and told him to build him a sanctuary. First, before they built the sanctuary, before they tore the storefront down, they built a chapel where they could have service while they was building the main sanctuary. And then they start working on building the sanctuary, raising funds to build a sanctuary. And they sold chicken dinners, sweet potato pies, and they had fundraisers. The pastor that built this church, he was a great man because he came in here without any finance, and they built this church with their own hand. The brothers, the pastor and the brothers that he had at the time, they built the church. They didn't hire no contractors. They built this church, the sanctuary, this church with their own hand. Yeah, they took block and tackle, and they didn't use cranes to pull those big beams up there. They pulled those big beams up there by hand, man.
Oh my God!
And built this church. During the time of the building of the sanctuary, the pastor friend in Monterey that pastored Victory Temple was H.R. Martin. They was very close friends, and one of the members had died in Seaside, and the pastor in Seaside was sick, so he asked his friend Pastor Mathis to come down and do the funeral service. So in the meantime, Pastor Mathis was building the sanctuary, and he went to do the funeral. And in the meantime, he had an automobile accident. Broke 3 ribs on one side, 2 on the other, crushed his nose, and he was having heart attacks at the same time. And winter was coming, and the church had no roof on it. And at that time, it rained in San Jose. It don't rain as much as it used to rain because they said because we don't have the arches. Trees draw the rain. And he came home after he stayed in the hospital for 6 weeks. The church needed a roof, and rain was coming. So he came down, at least 6 weeks he was there in the house. And at the time he thought he was going to die. The doctors had told him, say, you would never be able to preach hard anymore. You'd have to sit down in the chair and talk, and that's all you'll be able to do. So after 6 weeks, he came down they brought him down to the church, and he got up on the broadcast to say a few words on the broadcast. In the meantime, the Spirit of the Lord came over him and completely healed him. He said the Spirit of the Lord came over him. He started screaming and preaching, and said blood was coming out of his mouth, out of his nose. When he got through, he was healed. The next morning, he made a chair before any of the workers. The next morning, he was up walking them beams. And the brothers came down and they got scared and said, "You can't do that, come down." And he told them, said, "Get your hammer, let's go to where God done healed me."